So good afternoon, students. We'll start with module 3 of fiber optics and networks. And module 3 actually deals with three parts. So the first part is optical sources. The other part is optical detectors. And then the last part is receivers. Okay. So this is probably the first time you are coming across the word detector and receiver being used separately, because usually in communication engineering these terms are used quite loosely. Okay. However, we'll be very specific and we'll see what this optical detector is, and then we'll also see what the receivers are. These will be specifically the optical receivers, so we'll have to look at the structure also. Okay. So we'll deal with the detectors and receivers later, so I'll erase them. The first part of the module deals with optical sources, and in your syllabus we have the two most popular sources. The one is LED and the other one is laser, right? So in the previous modules what we have done is we've looked at the characteristics of the optical fiber. For example, the numerical aperture, the V number if it has to be a single mode fiber, also the refractive index, how it is related to the acceptance angle. Then we have looked at attenuation and dispersion, and then what kind of fibers can we have to operate at that wavelength where dispersion and attenuation is low. So those are known as the dispersion shifted fiber. So all these characteristics we need to consider when we are choosing an optical source, right? So when you choose an optical source, so I'll write the important points. To choose the source, okay, so I'm not going to use the word optical source again and again. It is understood that we are dealing with optical source, right? So to choose the source, what we need to understand is the geometry of the source, right? How big, small the source is. There are other characters also in terms of geometry. We'll discuss that. Second is we need to look at the attenuation of the fiber, which becomes a function of wavelength, right? We have seen that before. So at 1550 nanometer attenuation is low, whereas at 1310, 1320 nanometer the attenuation is high, right? The other thing we need to look at is dispersion. So I'm writing D. This mostly will be the material and waveguide dispersion. We'll not be talking more of intermodal dispersion, because the fiber generally used for long distance transmission would be the single mode fiber. And then we also need to look at the characteristics of the fiber itself, right? What kind of refractive index and so on, right? So with this in mind, we need to choose which source we can use, right? Of these, in my experience and opinion, that wavelength will be the most important, because we need to operate at higher wavelength. That is, somewhere around 1550 nanometer. This is where we need to operate. So here we'll be probably using the dispersion shifted fiber. So we need to use a source which will operate at this wavelength, and then we need the corresponding receiver RX, which will also be operating at that wavelength, right? So these are the general characteristics that we need to understand or keep in mind before going in for a source. In general, the other important point, in general, the LED is more compatible with multimode fiber, whereas the laser is more compatible with single mode fiber. It also works with multimode fiber, but working the LED with single mode fiber is very difficult. The reason being, for a multimode fiber, the diameter of the core is larger compared to the single mode fiber, and LED, which we'll see in detail, the light through the LED starts to broaden with distance, and therefore the fiber, the single mode fiber, it becomes very difficult to insert that kind of light from the LED into the single mode fiber, right? So just to give you a visual, so this could be a multi-mode fiber. but this will be a single mode fiber, right? So this is from the front view. So inserting light into this fiber, right? Light into this fiber is much easier compared to light into this fiber, right? The single mode fiber. So here in the single mode fiber, we need very directional light, and that is provided through the laser. Whereas in the multi-mode fiber, because the core area and the diameter is larger, so we can use the LED. So in general, that is the case. For the single mode fiber, considering the wavelength at 1550 nanometer, we definitely use the laser. However, laser has an issue that it is it is more costlier. So just to separate out LED with laser, right, the important points, these are also specified in the notes which I will be uploading, but just to quickly very important points. So here, and I'll be writing in short, so here the output is incoherent, so you'll have phase issues, whereas here output is coherent, so phase issues will not be there, right? Light spreads out. Here light is directional. Okay. Another structure wise, the difference, energy, we'll see in the making of the LED, energy is not produced in the cavity. There's something known as a cavity which will help us produce this optical energy. That is not done in the LED, whereas here light is generated through resonant cavity. So the light which is produced or generated by the laser is in resonance, and therefore it becomes coherent also. These are some of the advantages. Another disadvantage you can see of the LED is it is not wavelength selective, whereas the laser is highly wavelength selective. So that means you can try to use LED at any wavelength, but the efficiency will be very low. Whereas that for the laser, it is very selective. So lower wavelengths laser will not be very effective. So it is we should not bother using the laser at higher wavelengths. Lasers will be used somewhere when your wavelength exceeds about 1350, 1400 nanometer, right? So at 1500 nanometer, where we wish to operate, then laser becomes a very good source for us, right? So before we go into the LEDs and their structure, and laser and their structure, right, we need to understand a few basics of semiconductors, right? The basics of the semiconductor and how they operate. So this will be like a revision for you from lower semesters, but we need to know them to understand how the laser and the LED is going to operate. So we need to understand the valence band, the conduction band, and we need to understand the band gaps. So these are the three aspects over which semiconductors are going to work, right? So it's quite simple to understand these processes, and let me draw the processes for better visualization, and then I'll explain you how this works, right? So the valence band, and I will call this the in short VB. So the valence band is the band where all your electrons are lying, and this valence band gives us stability. So it's stable. That means the electrons are very stable at this band. And you have the conduction band CB, where the electrons really don't want to go, but this is the state where we want the electrons to be, so that they start conducting, means they start flowing and we'll get the current conduction out of them, right? So we need to ensure that these electrons which are there, at the uh, valence band, they somehow, let me draw this arrow. So these electrons, they somehow reach the conduction band, then they will be here, and then they'll start conducting, right? So we should have some process through which these electrons will all go up there, and once they reach there, then the process of conduction will take place, right? So obviously these electrons which are there at the valence band, they need to acquire an energy equal to the energy between the valence band and the conduction band, and therefore this band gap is known as the band gap, the gap between the valence and the conduction band. So that will be known as the band gap, because this is the gap between valence and conduction band, and it is equal to the energy required by the electron to move up there in the conduction band and start conducting, right? So you would have heard this statement: in order for electrons transition to take place, there could be the process of absorption, or spontaneous emission, or stimulated emission. Okay. If you have not heard, it's okay. Now we'll understand what these would mean. Okay. So the scenario which is there, which is drawn there. Okay. Now we have understood that these electrons need the energy to move from valence band to the conduction band, right? So now, in the case of uh, you know spontaneous emission, the case of the spontaneous emission, this occurs in LEDs. So what is going to happen is there's going to be some energy which the electrons are going to take, right? Which the electrons are going to acquire, and then they're going to move to the conduction band, right? So I'll draw another diagram. So this is the conduction band, and now the electrons have reached the conduction band. So let me draw the electrons here, and now they are conducting. However, this conduction band is unstable for the electrons, and therefore they would definitely want to try and come back to the valence band, right? So what the electrons would want to do is they would always want to fall back to this conduction band, right? So when they fall back, according to the momentum theory, energy conservation theory, the energy which the electrons took to move from valence band to conduction band in diagram number A, they need to give it back in diagram number B, right? So in diagram A, the electrons took the energy and they moved up to the conduction band. They were conducting, but they were unstable. Therefore, in diagram B, these electrons are now trying to fall back to the valence band. However, once they are falling back, or once they fall back, they need to return back that energy, right? So when they return back this energy for us comes in the form of light. So I'll write it as HF1, HF2, and HF3, because I've drawn 3 electrons. So you'll get HF1, HF2, HF3. So this is all light, right? And you can see that this process is happening spontaneously. We are not doing anything. There is no external supply. There's nothing. It's just energy gained by the electrons to move up to the conduction band, and then from there, because of the band being unstable, they are falling back and giving light to us, right? So this process, because it is completely spontaneous, is known as the spontaneous emission. The emission which is coming out, the light which is coming out, HF1, 2, and 3, this is all spontaneous, right? Now you can see here that this HF1, HF2, HF3, these are not coherent, they are not resonant, they are not in conjunction with each other. So HF1 is a spontaneous emission, HF2 is a spontaneous emission. So these could add constructively, these could add destructively, we do not know. There could be phase changes, there could be amplitude distortion, we do not know, right? So because of this reason, since LEDs are based on this spontaneous emission, we made a statement earlier that the light through the LED is incoherent in nature, right? So that is the idea here. But please keep in mind that we are not supplying any energy or anything in the case of spontaneous emission, right? So diagram A is known as absorption. It is known as absorption because the electrons in the valence band are going to absorb some energy to move to the conduction band. And diagram number B is known as spontaneous emission. Spontaneous emission. So it is on this basis that the LED is going to operate. Right. So I hope it is clear how the LED will operate. Okay, we'll discuss a little bit more on this when we talk about the structures of LED. So now we have another process through which the laser will operate. So the full form of laser, light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. So each of these words in the full form have a very strong meaning, and if you understand the meaning and the way that lasers operate, then you really don't have to mug up the full form of the laser, right? So it says in the laser, it is light amplification. So we'll see how the light is getting amplified by stimulated. So the very important word in the full form of laser is stimulated. So stimulant or stimulate is to provide external energy. External energy, it could be external force, external momentum, it could be a lot of things. Here for the lasers, we are because of the working, we are interested in calling it provide external energy, right? So let me draw those three diagrams again. So I'll draw absorption. So you have the conduction band here, you have the valence band here. So the electrons are here in the stable state, right? Now, in the case of absorption, there was an energy, right? So I'll write it as E. There was an energy here, and there was an energy here, right? So this is the case of absorption. Now, apart from this absorption, I will also provide an external energy to these electrons, right? So let me call the absorbed energy, which is spontaneous, as E1, right? And I'm also supplying an external energy E2 from the outside, right? So this is, let this be E2, let this be E2, right? Because I don't know anything about spontaneous emission. It could or could not occur, I do not know, but I'm very sure about this energy E2 which I'm providing, so that now the electrons, so if I call this diagram number 1, in the second diagram, diagram number 2, now the electrons would have moved up in the conduction band, right? So they've all moved up here, and now the energy which each of these electrons is having is E1, the energy due to absorption, plus the energy which we had supplied externally. So the energy into the electrons is E1 plus E2, right? So what we are doing in this case is, apart from the absorption, we are also giving a stimulant to the electrons so that they can overcome the band gap energy and move to the conduction band, right? So this is the second process. And now obviously the electrons, being unstable in the conduction band, will want to move down, right? And once they move down, they will have to release that energy, right? Now what energy are they going to release? They are going to release the energy E1 plus E2. They are going to release the energy E1 plus E2. Now comparing this with what was happening in LEDs, there are two differences. One, the energy is getting amplified. Why? Because apart from only E1, which is the absorbed energy, we are also getting E2, which is the energy which we had supplied externally. Therefore, light amplification, right? By stimulated, right? Stimulated. Why? Because we had given a stimulant to the electrons to move to the conduction band, which is E2, which has energy E2, right? By stimulated emission of radiation, right? So all this is coming out in the form of light, right? So this diagram 1 is as it is absorption, because the electrons are absorbing energy. Diagram number 2 is just the absorption process, the electrons moving there, right? And diagram number 3 here consists of both spontaneous and stimulated emission. One part of this radiation which comes out is E1, which is the absorption process, which happens spontaneously, whereas the other one is because of the stimulant which we had given to the electrons to move from valence band to the conduction band. Right? So this diagram number 3 is the process through which the laser is going to work, and obviously it gives us amplified light. Okay. Now, how to make this coherent or having the same phase? All that we'll see, and we'll see that there is something which is known as a cavity, which is used in the laser, and this cavity will ensure that the light which is generated through the laser, you know, remains in the cavity, keeps getting amplified, and is also in phase with the other lights which have been generated. So that's how laser works, and it gives us a lot of advantages, right? So in this so I hope this working was clear. Okay. So in this, what we have not discussed is regarding the band gap. So the band gap is nothing but the difference, the energy difference between the valence and conduction band, which the electron needs to have to move to the conduction band. And so for the electron transition to occur to or from the conduction band, with the absorption or emission of light or photons, your energy and momentum needs to be conserved. And based on this, you can classify the semiconductors based on direct or indirect band gap, right? So we can have this band gap as direct band gap, or we can have this as indirect band gap, right? So in the direct band gap, so I'll just give you the important points. uh, More details will be in the notes. So in the direct band gap, the electrons and holes, which are positive charges, electrons and holes have same value of momentum. Okay, and so the recombination becomes very easy, and the emission of photon happens henceforth. And the diagram for the same looks like this. So this is the conduction band having a lot of electrons, E minus. The electrons are placed here, and we are looking at the momentum. Let's call it K, which it's called usually K. And this here is the direct band gap energy. Okay, and here you'll have the electron transition. So when the electrons is going to make a transition here, you will have energy equal to HF being released as a photon, right? So that is what is happening with indirect band gap energy, right? Next, we have what is known as the indirect band gap energy, indirect band gap. So in this, the conduction band and the valence band right? These occur at different values of momentum. The momentum is not the same, right? So here conduction band and valence band have different momentum. So by this we mean the electrons in those bands, okay? Because band itself cannot have momentum, but the electrons there are going to have different momentum. Okay, so this is a little bit more complicated. Therefore, we always prefer the materials with direct band gap energy, right? So the diagram looks like this in this case. So you have the holes, and this is the momentum K. So I'm just going to write K here. This is the conduction band, and here we start dealing with a new type of material which is known as phonons. So I'm not going into the details of that. We have the phonons here. So the photon energy will be because of photons plus phonons. Okay, and this will be the transition. This will be the transition. And these are the electrons in the conduction band. So what you have here is the energy equal to HF being. Okay. So these are the two band gaps through which we can operate, and but generally we always have the direct band gap, so that it is easier, as you can see, to have the momentum in the conduction band and the valence band same, right? Okay, so I hope you have understood what are the differences through which the LED and the lasers are going to operate. So we'll take LED and laser one by one, and we'll see how these will work. There is a lot of detail in each of those. However, we will restrict ourselves to the ones which are mentioned in your syllabus, right? Even the types and everything, there are a lot many types, right? But we'll restrict ourselves to the one in the syllabus. Sometimes it goes into a little bit of more theory, so I'll be giving you the important points. The other things are mentioned in the notes. Okay, so let us begin with the LEDs. So the full form is light emitting diodes. So LED in general will be used as a source in optical systems, optical communication systems, when the bit rate that you require is not very high. It is usually somewhere between 100 to 200 Mbps. So not a very high bit rate. So for lower bit rates, we can always use the LEDs. You can use them in office environments, that is small distance communication, with the multimode fibers, and optical power also is less, like few microwatts. So LEDs are very restricted in their use. With distance, they really their efficiency really decreases, so we cannot use them for very long distance transmission, right? However, on the other hand, their advantages, the drive circuit, the circuit required for them to work efficiently, that is not very complex. It's very simple. They don't require any kind of stabilization, external stabilization. They work on their own, and their fabrication is also not very not very complex. So you can easily you know uh, fabricate a light emitting diode. So, and they also work generally in the lower ranges of the wavelength. So what is it that we require from the LEDs? Okay, so what is the requirement from LED? So the first requirement is its radiance, that is whatever it radiates. So we call it as radiance output is high. We require it to be very, very high. So these are necessary so that we can couple them with the fiber, because we know that the fiber itself has many losses like attenuation and dispersion. So high radiance from the LED really helps us to decrease or compensate for the losses in the fiber. Right? This radiance we can also call it as the brightness. Okay, it is usually measured in watts, and this is the optical power which is radiated out of the LED, right? So in LED as a block, the input is if this is the LED, the input is going to be electricity, that is electrons, that is current, and the output is going to be the photons, which is nothing but light, right? So how bright is this light is known as the radiance, and we require this LED to have very high radiance or high brightness, right? Also it should have what is known as very fast emission response time. So this is easy to understand. This time is nothing but the delay between the application of the current at the input. That is, if you look at the block diagram, the moment we apply this current at the input, how fast can we generate the light at the output? That time delay is measured through the response time, and we obviously need this response time to be very high. The moment I plug in and start the LED and apply a current, I am expecting output at the LED, but that is not going to happen because LED has its own circuit and it will take some time. So we require this response time to be high. Otherwise you'll have to wait for the output to just to be shown after a long delay once you apply the input. So that's not allowed. Okay, so we will be deriving an equation for the response time, and we'll see that it is dependent on few factors. Next is very important, high quantum efficiency. High quantum efficiency, and this I'll define now, and this is one of the most important parameters. This is also used to highlight a laser also. So this quantum efficiency is nothing but it is the ratio of injected electron hole pairs. That means how much of current are you giving inside the LED at the input, right? So these are injected electron hole pairs divided by radiative recombination. This means if I supply, let's say for example, just for understanding, 100 electrons at the output, am I getting corresponding 100 photons or not? If I'm getting 100 photons at the output, the efficiency is 100%, right? That means the injected electron hole pairs were 100, and the ones which are giving me radiation at the output in terms of photon, that is also 100. So efficiency is 1, but that is not going to be happening, right? This is measured by what is known as responsivity. Okay, this we'll see at the receiver end later, but what I am trying to explain here is that if some amount of light is some amount of current is injected into the LED, we should expect that the corresponding so many number of photons should be appearing at the output. So the quantum efficiency needs to be very, very high, right? So what we expect is an LED structure which will give you high radiance, high quantum efficiency. So such kind of a structure should be there when you are making the LED. so that the radiative output is very high, right? And for this kind of output which we require, uh, we have structures which ensure what is known as carrier confinement. Carrier confinement basically means that the electrons and the holes, they remain in the structure, and they are used again and again to generate more and more photons, right? So this kind of carrier confinement, this will be used to achieve very high level of radiative recombination, right? And therefore we will be getting very high amount of quantum efficiency, right? Also we'll see that this carrier confinement, it prevents absorption of the electrons and holes, and for this we need to have the p-n junction, which we will discuss in the structure of the LED, right? So just to give you an idea of the LED structure, we don't have enough time to start with the structure, but just to motivate you towards the structure, to have this carrier confinement, to ensure that we have high output, high output efficiency in terms of radiation, we have two types of LEDs. So one is known as homojunction, and the other one is known as double heterojunction structure. Double heterojunction structure, right? So of these two, of the homojunction and the heterojunction structure, the most popular and the most efficient is the double heterojunction structure, right? So we don't have enough time to discuss that structure. So what I'll do is I will portray that structure to you. It is already there in the notes. Okay, I'm still making the notes for this module. It is already there in the notes. So I will be showing you that structure and explaining the important points out of that structure. Then we'll also after this. So this is these two are the making of LED. These two are the making of LEDs. Then we'll discuss very quickly the types of LEDs. And here you'll see that we'll talk about what is known as surface emitting LEDs. And the other one is edge emitting LEDs. Okay. Exam wise also, this has been a consistent question. Explain the types of LEDs. Okay, so it comes for about 6 to 8 marks. So we'll discuss those two also. What are the two types? And a very important I would want to discuss is the mathematics behind quantum efficiency, and how we can get large amount of light through through the use of LEDs. So that is going to be very important. Same kind of mathematics will also be done when we talk about the lasers. So we need to do that. We'll have equations for quantum efficiency and power, a good equation with the numericals. That is also a very common question in the VTU exam paper. And then we'll also look at what are the advantages, disadvantages of LED. This we have already seen, but we want to see this in detail. Very important, what we'll see later on, just to introduce it to you, is modulation of LED. Okay, this will be very important because we have only done modulation till now, keeping electrical signals in mind. Okay, but we also need to see if the optical signals can be modulated, right? So because if that doesn't happen, then the communication is not going to be efficient. We need modulation for longer distances, right? So these are some of the aspects which we are going to talk about in terms of LEDs. So this I'll pick up in the next lecture. We don't have enough time to do that. Okay, so in the next lecture, I'll talk about the material which is used to make the LED, and then the types of the LED, and if time permits, then I will also be talking about the mathematics which is used to find the efficiency of an LED.